Jamie, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yes, so the rugby. We're not going to get into the rugby.
I don't want to talk about it. It's in my eyes. There has been 364 days in this year, and Saturday did not exist. End down.
But not for the Welsh and the Irish, anyway.
No.
I'm a council tax paying Englishman in Wales now, paying council tax in Wales, I'm pleased to say. And I've literally got the Welsh rugby bug. I've been here for about a year now.
Yeah.
Really have got a bug. I was literally standing up, shouting at the top of my voice. No, really, genuinely, like on my own, of course, wondering what the neighbours were thinking. And it was really sad to see what happened with Wales as well this weekend, but a good effort.
Yeah.
Good effort on every count.
I think it was. I think we've got to look and see how far we've actually come from where they were when Wayne Pippen.
And it brought loads of happess.
This will turn us into a rugby podcast live.
7 weeks. So were you into rugby before coming over the bridge?
Yeah, in a very amateur way.
Okay.
Many years ago, I was brought up in London.
Yeah.
And mindful, I'm not going to go back to when I was a baby or anything, but when I played for the under-16s for Richmond for a very short period of time. So I think that was before rugby became fully professional and whatnot. Richmond were actually quite a big name back then.
Yeah, but it was. Jimmy, it was. Well, London Welsh ended up. That's where they ended up.
Too right. Yeah. And then in the mid-90s, I worked for the then chairman of Bath Rugby over the bridge there in England, and that was a thing. I graduated from art school. I'll probably tell you how I got to art school in a moment, but my first job was helping to run a video production company in the mid-90s with the wife, Sean, from the Valleys, and running a video production company in Bath, actually making corporate films and things like that. It was an amazing experience straight out of university. And the boss was the chairman of Bath Rugby. And back then I really realised how absolutely Bath in the southwest of England was its complete identity, and probably remains still, is more so than ancient Rome, is actually rugby. Yeah. Back then it was absolutely at its peak. They were the best team in the world, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, they were brilliant. And I guess a little bit like the Principality Stadium here, it's right in the heart, isn't it? I love that. I used to go there a lot because a very good friend of mine's sister did a lot with Dyson, so obviously he was the main sponsor there, wasn't he? So we used to go to a box there, like quite regularly, and I used to love going there. I used to love just turning up on the train there. Such a great place, and then the atmosphere of the rugby.
Well, Tony Swift was the chair, and Sean was his then wife, and he had an interest in a financial company actually called Robson Taylor. So we had this local video production office, painted orange, a bit like your office, orange and blue, a little bit like your office, in the mid-90s with an editing suite. I don't know how we got that. It was an expensive Avid, which was one of the first digital editing machines. We were making corporate videos, and one of the first ones we did, I was straight out of art school, I had no idea, it wasn't film school. One of the first videos we made was a little corporate film based at the Rec in Bath. It was a corporate for David S. Smith Packaging, I think they're called DS Smith now, like a international client, straight out of art school. It was a real gift. But that's the power of sport and rugby and connections and all that sort of stuff. I guess we'll touch on that.
You see, especially in Wales now here, where sport and business is so interwoven, because they're all, more so the rugby, because it's a bit like Gaelic football in Ireland. The people that play rugby in Wales are seen at a higher pedestal. I think they're, for what they do, you're representing your region or your club and your country, and you're representing the 3 or 4 million people on there. They are held up there, and those people then are the whole thing of rugby is interwoven all the way down to such a small little village, and so that people can associate, well, he has climbed up the ladder and now he represents me in the countries. It's unique in any other country. I know, England has football and rugby and different sports, but I think for Wales it's predominantly, the football people will disagree with me, predominantly rugby interwoven with society.
Like I said at the top of the pod, I've been here for about a year, so I came to Wales to help make a TV show actually in the Valleys. Maybe we'll touch on that later on as well. But I noticed very, very quickly that, or just what you said. And I was living in Bristol, and 55 minutes, an hour away, totally different world. Obviously, in some cases, different language, everything from different road signs, but a warmth. And I'm very patriotic English, but I have to tell you, the warmth of reception I've had in Wales, and I'm not just saying that, it's been magical. And that connection, to close the loop on the Bath story, was that I thought Bath was like the epicenter of world rugby. No, it's Wales, and particularly here in Cardiff, where
so you've been to the games already in the stadium? I
have. It was extraordinary. 2 days before an uncomfortable England Wales game, when I had to decide. I had a friend from Ukraine. They said, "What is this game, rugby?" They were a refugee, incidentally, and I was determined to get tickets. 2 days beforehand, I reached out to a member of a business I run, and we had tickets later that day for a sold-out game. And that's another thing I've realised. Because it's business and sport are intertwined, you can reach out to someone in business and they will know somebody who's got a ticket.
Absolutely.
And it's not like they're not dodgy. It's like, no, they've got a box. A mate of theirs has dropped out. They've got 2 tickets. And the most amazing thing about that game a few months ago, I think it was in February, March time, that international, packed stadium, great game, not brilliant, but they showed the Ukrainian flag on the screens, and there was a minute silence to remember those in conflict. It was a really special moment. I thought, yeah, this is a very special country.
Yeah, and you listen to what players say about the Principality Stadium. It's a packed out stadium. It's like Colosseum. You know what I mean? You know, it's a totally different. Like you have New Zealand players talking about coming to there to play. They just love it, and the drive into the city, because they usually stay in a hotel a little bit outside, and they drive in, and there's just the streets lined with supporters, everyone getting on, and it is amazing. And I think that's a little bit different because we have a stadium right in the heart. It's like Twickenham. It's like everything sticks.
Yeah, it is.
Really. John, I've been there. There's not much atmosphere, is there? Because you are right in the.
I will say this, even though it's not a rugby podcast.
It sounds that way, doesn't it?
I will say this. The 2 memories now already, which are like cast in my soul, which are very special. Had the privilege of meeting a multi-capped former Welsh player called Rupert Moon, a fellow broadcaster, actually. And I reached out to him. Somebody who knows somebody, and that's what I've worked out in Wales as well, knows somebody. They say you're good. They communicate that you're good, and that person's either referring you to. So Rupert Moon met with me, and he was chairing, he'd just finished chairing, he won't mind me saying this, I'm sure, the Rugby Charitable Trust. There's a foundation which looks after, they do many things. And it was, I just came into the back end of the meeting. I didn't know really what it was, just to meet with Rupert, to talk to him about working with him, actually, to engage him in my business. And only afterwards I realised that the trustees were like the captains of industry, the head of the BBC here in Wales. I mean, it was amazing. And they're all eating sandwiches. I thought that was a perfect networking opportunity. I completely missed that one because I was just nibbling my sandwiches, just sat there in the corner on my own. But it was an amazing meeting with Rupert. And I realised, once you've played for this country and, you played on hallowed ground here, it's something very, very special here in Wales and abroad. And then the other thing is in August, again, I can't believe how I lucked out. I'm a newbie here, really, in Wales. We had Warren Gatland come and speak, the head coach for Wales, and it was the day after he'd announced his squad for the World Cup. He was probably one of the most in-demand people in sport in the world at that very day. And I must say this, and everything which goes on in these meetings, perhaps we'll touch on this later, is very confidential. But one of the members was hosting a fundraising event for the ABF Soldiers charity, and they just said to Warren and me, "Look, is there any chance we get a squad signed shirt?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll be good for that," or words to that effect. And as I was walking Gats out of the meeting, down to his car, back to his hotel, he just kind of stopped and he turned to me and my PA and looked kind of a bit confused, like he'd forgotten his jacket or something. He said, "Oh, can we make sure you remind me about to get this shirt signed?" I thought, he just switched his phone on. There must have been 1 million messages from around the world, from every news media organisation world, questioning him about his team, which had just been announced the afternoon before. And he actually stopped and spent a moment to think about a charity, a pledge he'd made to get a signed shirt. and I auctioned it on Friday at a golf club, and it made some good money. So that was a really nice thought. I think that there's a measure of a man is not what they do on the world stage, but there's little details, and that's a little private moment. I'll never forget that he would have had the world on his shoulders about that squad he'd picked, and the dual captainship and all the sort of stuff around that, and he stopped and he really made a point, and it was away from everyone else. It was just his own thought, and I thought, wow, this is a man of great mental capacity who can remember these things and remember that. I got the feeling that Warren Gatlin, his word is his bond. That was what I take away from that moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot kind of that people do say that about him, but now we're giving TalkSport a run for his money.
Yeah.
I was going to come out with two more statements about rugby, but I'm going to shelve it.
Well, I say now the TalkSport will be asking for us next. Jamie, let's go back to. Well, I guess when
I was one.
From when you were born.
Yes.
Welcome to episode 1 of 60.
Yeah.
No, let's go back to the start. Let's get your take on your journey where you are now, and then let's kind of naturally chat about the business now.
So, absolute snapshot. I was brought up in West London, Shepherd's Bush, in the 1970s. But I told you my age and you both look shocked. So I'll just say that for the podcast. Yeah. Also, we just dated this podcast by talking a lot about the rugby, haven't we? But I'll date it even further. I'll date myself and go, it was somewhere in the early 70s, something like that. And my mum had always been in the book business. She'd been an educationalist. We were from quite a humble background, I would say. I remember distinctly not being able to afford things like ketchup and stuff. So I'm not pleading poverty, but we were definitely under-resourced at times, and that's the nature of my mum being a freelancer. My dad, at one point, most of his life, he was a professional magician. And then he got into photography, and that's how he met my mum, who was a journalist at the time. So long and short of it is, I grew up in West London, and happy memories. And then when I ran about 12, 13, my dad remarried, and he started off in the antiques business at London's Mecca, or one of the two Meccas, I would say, of antiques collectibles, called Portobello Road. So I would find myself on a Saturday morning and afternoon sat on the market stall in Jones Arcade in Portobello Road. Now, Portobello on the outside just looks like a bunch of posh houses, because it is. And back then, I think it was still, Notting Hill Gate wasn't the place that you saw in the movies, even in the early 80s, it wasn't, but there's a whole underworld of those big houses where there's a labyrinth of corridors and what is effectively underground markets. It's really odd. And arcades, I don't know how they fit them under Portobello, but they're there. So we were in one of those stalls, and my stepmother and my dad were both antique dealers at that point, selling stuff largely from the 20th century. So I got a passion for design that carried through to wanting to be a designer, an artist of some sort. I came to university in Bristol. I loved my time at university. I really loved it. But I kept my own market stall going, which was at the other Mecca, Camden Stables Market. I kept that going at the weekends, and would go to and from London from Bristol. And I think that's where I got a kind of a passion for both art, for a little bit of creative stuff, but also an appreciation of design of the past and collectibles, and also a little bit about buying and selling. Running a market stall is definitely cut and thrust, especially at Camden Stables Market. Literally used to be stables. I could literally write a sitcom about the other stall holders who were in my unit. We had a guy who had a #1 hit in the 60s. He performed with Otis Redding live. We had a guy who lived permanently in the Civil War in his head, in the American Civil War, and dressed as such. We had a guy who used to be a professional ballet dancer. I have to leave other details out, but you will never meet a more interesting mix. Sounds like a quote from Star Wars here. Mos Eisley Space. You'll never meet a more interesting mix of people, certainly at that point, who are at the sort of end of antiques and collectibles. They attract. The whole sector attracts an unbelievable rich set of characters. They've all got stories which would make a podcast of themselves. That wasn't a short intro.
You've nailed that. You mentioned Mos Eisley in Star Wars. It's my boy's birthday. It's 6:30 this morning. We were looking at a Where's Wally type of book for not Grogu, for Yoda. And it was those things, these labyrinths of areas and places where anything was sold. And when you were saying that there, I was just dozing off, almost going, I've seen that picture this morning where it's just chaos and there is animals, aliens, whatever they are. And it just, you can take it back to that. They're
Fun fact.
Weird places.
Fun fact, I graduated. I passed the travel agent in Bristol, not a word of a lie. I hadn't had a holiday for years. I did well. I did well at college and I really worked it. I didn't mention that, but
Good tattoo.
You can't see my face on a podcast, can you? Not bad. There is a place called Tatooine in Tunisia. So I just thought I'd always wanted to go. This was before the prequels and the more recent sort of series on Disney Plus. So Star Wars was just 3 movies at that point, and it was a distant memory really for most people. But for me, it was like, for many people, it was an absolutely integral part of my development as a person, because it was a fairy tale, it was a myth, and it's another reason why I got into film, by the way, but that's something maybe we'll talk about or not. But I walked past the travel agent, I went in, it was back in the days, it was pre-internet, and I said, is there a chance I could go to Tunisia? I think I had 45 minutes to go and pack a bag and flew to Tunisia, I think from Birmingham at that time, and it was amazing. And I went to the Star Wars Hotel, which is in a tiny settlement called Montmartre. So for those of you who know the movies, and even the more recent ones I think it featured, there's in Tunisia, in relatively ancient Tunisia, there were a tribe of people called troglodytes, and the name, they're underground dwellers, and they have this beautiful kind of costume, and they use tattoos in henna, and they would live in this underground complex, which was in the very first Star Wars movie I think it was filmed in 75, 76. It is literally still there. It is an underground dugout, a series of caves built many, many years ago and lived in up until relatively recently. Wow. I was the only visitor there at Montmartre. Because it was crazy. I was on my own. I had to get to Louage halfway across the desert. I shared the Louage with a Libyan family, and don't forget, I think we were at conflict. Basically, we were in conflict as British people with Libya. It was a great moment to share this kind of taxi cab. It was a few pence, and then go to Luke Skywalker's home on my own. And they just had like a handwritten sign saying the Star Wars Hotel, so you could sleep in the place where Luke Skywalker has his lunch with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Literally, it was exactly, and you could see little moments where in the mid-70s the art department has still left the bits and bobs in there. It was that fresh. Wow. It was a very amazing moment, and people say don't go to those places or meet your heroes, but I would. It was a very strange experience. It was like a very strange village settlement, and magical to be there on your own in a place which you'd studied over and over again as a student of film, but also as a lover of those original films. It's a very, very special moment in my life. Will never leave me. On your own in Luke Skywalker's dugout home.
You'd love that.
Oh, I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
No, I do. Those films, like saying those films, like, you know, I grew up in those films as well. Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of, I didn't even realise that it was there.
Yeah, and there is a Tatooine. But yeah, for those who are interested, it's still there. Maybe you can Google it, and Googled it ever since I visited. But Montmartre is the name of the place, and there was I think you paid a few pence, and you could literally sleep in the set. So get your head around that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to go there. I wouldn't be allowed. Need to go 2 weeks away.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason why that film touched on people, and the reason why it connected so deeply with people, is that George Lucas, many people don't realise this, was a student, was partly mentored by a professor who wrote a book called The Hero of the Thousand Faces. And this professor had studied different cultures and different myths. I've got some credibility here because I was a filmmaker for a while, and I had a Hollywood deal as well, which I may tell you about. So I've got some credibility. I looked deep into it, and George Lucas studied with this professor and used his wisdom and his new discoveries from this book to discover that there are universal stories from across cultures and across time which resonate. Somehow when you listen to it in the spoken word or on the screen, or even in something as relatively simple as a poem, there are universal archetypes, and it goes back to Jung, and these archetypes, from the hero to the shadow figure, who's usually the villain, Darth Vader in the Star Wars case. But usually, incredibly, the same story is being played out over and over again. And there's a really good summary of this, actually, and it's a book by Christopher Vogler, Vogler, called The Writer's Journey. And it's one of the most eye-opening books I've ever read. And what you realise is that human beings have this very strange thing as a species. Words and the spoken word and the written word are just something which the animal kingdom never benefits from. Yeah. And there's little pearls of wisdom where we talk about, the author talks about the shaman in thousands of years ago in different tribes and how they were looked up to and how they would encode stories and pass on wisdom to the fellow tribespeople and the younger people in the tribe upwards to the elders. And one thing stuck in my mind, and this is why I became a writer, I think. The shaman would often sit down and move rune stones around in front of the tribe. And people go, whoa, what are these stones with strange abstract marks on? And then the shaman would move the rune stones into a different order. And then he would say, this means life. And people go, okay. Then he would move the rune stones around with these abstract markings on into a different formation and show them to people. And this means death. And people go, ooh. And you go, how does that, this is clever stuff. And this is the root of the word spelling. It was magical. Spelling, if you think about the word spelling, it's literally casting a spell. Yeah. How a word or something written or spoken can completely change the energy. So that's all in this book by Vodka. But George Lucas had a unbelievable. In a moment in time, he was mentored by this incredible Joseph Campbell, was the professor, and Star Wars is literally beat for beat, story point for story point, a deep unveiling of mythical structure, and it's no surprise that it touched the whole world for so many years and still does. It's a fact.
Wow, that's some good facts.
Let's talk about business.
Yeah.
I stopped you on your intake of breath asking a question there because I went off on my Joseph Campbell lecture. But
that's great knowledge.
We've gone through chatting a lot of things before, and predominantly a sport and stuff like that. But it's Star Wars, that's the first time Star Wars has come up.
But I think it's good to see actually that Star Wars has a deeper meaning than what people actually think.
Profound and unreal. It really does. If you read The Hero of the Thousand Faces, you'll realise that George Lucas is a genius, of course, but he was lucky enough to be at the right time at the first point in human history to have somebody who'd studied all the cultures and all the great myths and stories and realised that there is. I'll just pick one figure, and I'm sorry to go back to it. The Herald. The Herald is one of the archetypes in this story structure, and if you place the Herald at the right moment in the story, you're going to sell a screenplay. The Herald announces important news, as they did in the courts of medieval England, for example, and Europe. And guess who the Herald character is? There's two of them. It's R2-D2 and C-3PO. The Herald, and literally in Return of the Jedi, C-3PO is both an interpreter droid, but he's also making proclamations and is carrying important information. And R2-D2, of course, is carrying the plans to the eventual destruction of the Empire. So the Herald figure is something that makes an important announcement, which the hero gets wind of, and that's often a call to action. But it is literally C-3PO. I've got a story about C-3PO. I went to go and get my okay, we're going to jump forward to when I was a filmmaker and a presenter. I was in the American Embassy. To get an O1 visa is really difficult as a British person to go and work in the United States. It's called an exceptional talent, and I've had three. Unbelievably difficult. You have to have an attorney in America lobbying the unions. You have to have a letter from the Oscars and the television union saying they don't object to you coming to either direct or present TV shows, both of which I was doing in a small way at various points. And I was all cleared. I was good to go. I had to go for my interview at the American Embassy, so I traipsed over from Bristol. You leave your phones at the hotel. You can't take them in. And I'm in a queue. There's one person in the queue for the O1 day, and I recognise him, but nobody else does. It's Anthony Daniels, who plays C-3PO. And and of course, because I'm a Star Wars nerd, he was really happy that I recognised him, because I said, you were a Shakespearean actor before 1974 when you got hooked into Star Wars, and he was so touched that and we got on so well. And back then I was on British television a lot, so he kind of recognised me. It eased things off, and the fact that you're getting an O1 means there was Rufus Sewell came along, Kylie Minogue, so I was an amazing company. But it was, I had half an hour, 45 minutes, just me and C3PO in the relative cold, very early in the morning in central London, nobody recognising him, and he was going there to get his visa. And by the way, he's the only actor now alive who's been in every single Star Wars movie. So he's an incredible guy. And he was such a lovely gentleman, huge humour. But I literally grew up with I still have a postcard of R2D2 and C3PO on my wall, but I grew up with the Story of Star Wars album, and it was him on my front cover, and I listened to that every day, and I'd recreate Star Wars in my mum's front room in Shepherd's Bush using furniture.
Can I say, in our house, my little man, it's RD22.
Oh, is it?
I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's not R2D2, it's RD22. That's just the way it's...
The Herald was C3PO, and that's just one example. Wow. The Herald, and he's deployed in that story to announce important news and also to carry important news. And also, they're in Shakespearean terms, they're considered the low characters who often the story's told for. And you think about it, yes, Star Wars again. I'm sorry to get behind it, but it is one of the great. It is the greatest movie of all time, probably maybe apart from Citizen Kane or Vertigo by Hitchcock. It's considered the most popular movie of all time, along with Snow White, actually. And Toy Story 1 is now in the top 10 of best movies as well. So classic stories. But, it's worth to give it a thought as well.
Wow. That's some amazing history. TV, film. Let's go to EVO.
Mm-hmm.
Is it EVO Group, or are you... What's the...
So I have a few small businesses.
Yes.
Many years ago, I was working as a broadcaster covering shows about antiques and collectibles, and I was finding that the time periods between being booked to do a season or series, if you're in the UK, was getting longer and longer. It's a hard gig. It's like being an actor, being a presenter. And I was a presenter with specialist knowledge. And what I discovered, certainly in British TV and maybe in America as well, it's cyclical. DIY shows are popular, cooking shows are popular, property shows are popular, and then antiques comes back around again. It seems to be like a 5 or 6 year cycle. I was in one of those cycles. So I used to organise parties for my friends just in a roof terrace in Bristol, and friends would come along. I'd pay for all the food and drink, and I'd realise, hang on a second, after about 2 summers of doing that, we had a chef at one point, which sounds very kind of a little bit avant-garde and stuff, but it was really lovely, just bringing nice people together, and we get some really interesting friends of friends rocking up, and I'd make some new. It was just lovely, and I need to monetize this because I'm just paying for it. So I booked a hotel, and 225 people turned up. So it was just so that started this thing called business networking, which I didn't know what it was. I just called it business and social networking. That's my phone telling me to I can't think of a witty thing to cover my story. I put my phone on silent. This happened at a funeral. So you put your phone on Do Not Disturb. I'm telling you, if you've got a phone made by somebody called the Apple Company, I like them very much. I used to train their products to get me through university. If you put an iPhone on Do Not Disturb, which I promise you I did, for the avoidance of doubt, it's still, if you've got a scheduled alarm in there, it will still go off, and it went off in a funeral. Actually, this time last year, it was absolutely excruciating. And as embarrassing what's just happened. But moving on, I've kind of lost track a little bit. EVO parties.
Yes. The networking events.
Networking. I discovered what networking was.
Yes.
It was, I landed in it by mistake back in 2008, actually, and they were just a huge success. So we did them in Cardiff, Oxford, and particularly Bristol. We ended up having 550, 565 people per meeting. This is bonkers. Yeah, but it was unusual. It was unusual. And it was at the beginning of the credit crunch. And what I didn't realise back at the time that in an economic downturn where people are struggling and there's uncertainty, people still want to meet and congregate. Yeah. And by the way, if you have an evening event, of which this Only Connect was, more so than ever, especially if there's bottles of champagne and free Krispy Kreme donuts, which we got deal the local factory, and people dress up in black tie, you realise that actually people still need to get together. right? So jump forward a few years, and 7 or 8 years ago this month, I started, in fact, next week, I started a business called EVO Business Networking. I started it as a side hustle to doing stadium-sized events. It's been really good fun. It's a small business, I can't pretend otherwise, but it does bring people together, predominantly for breakfasts, in a kind of a formatted way. We use online, and it grew exponentially during the lockdown, because guess what? There was only a certain amount of things we could do, and I had a business which was already 5 years old, 4.5 years old, so it grew during lockdown. 3 years ago, during the lockdown, I felt there was a space for business owners, particularly business owners who are working in the SME or small and medium enterprise as a code word. There might be a space where we could bring maybe 12 leaders together in a room, talk about problems and challenges, share ideas. Because I knew a few of my friends who are running quite large and complex businesses and organizations. Yeah. They would say it's lonely at the top. I hope none of my members mind me saying this, but every single member, almost bar none, has said that at some point, privately or publicly. If you're running a business, if you have staff, if you're turning over a few million quid or pounds, very, very few people understand the pressures, the unique set of circumstances, and the fact that you're on call. Doesn't matter whether you've stepped away from the business as a chairperson, you're usually on call in some way, shape or form. And I found that this morning myself, actually, in a major way. Actually, I had to make quick decisions and move quickly as the company owner to avoid a very bad situation, relatively speaking, in my business. And I resolved it only minutes beforehand. So, yeah, EVO Ultra, a peer group, and I opened up in England, and I've opened up in Wales at the beginning of this year. In Wales, it's been going so well. I'm not knocking England; it's been going well there as well. But in Wales, it's something very, very special here about business leaders wanting to come together. And when I had the idea, I phoned the former head of the British Army, General Sir Peter Wall. He's a 4-star general. We'd done some work together for the previous year. I think it was the same day as the idea, kind of call it EVO Ultra, separate company, make it separate, not networking as such, a little bit of networking, but more about coming together and sharing ideas and problems. And I phoned Sir Peter, had a quick chat. We met online because it was during COVID. And he very kindly agreed to chair a group of 12 business leaders, not knowing who they were, but it's good if you've got something, a track record to point to when you're trying to encourage somebody to take a punt, as it were. And he took a punt. And 30 meetings later this month, he continues to chair one of the groups over the bridge in England. And it's a group of 12. And he's an amazing leader, just a leader of leaders, I would say. As I said, he was the chief of the general staff. It was a 4-star general, and has his own company called Amicus, which is a leadership consultancy. But also, it's almost mind-boggling. There's 12 directors of a business called General Dynamics Corporation, one of the biggest companies in the world. It's a Fortune 100 business, and he's one of the 12 global directors. And they, it's a big company.
Yeah.
Do you know when you said there, it isn't as such a networking event? And I know even one of the members, Nick was on here today, and he said it's very, I'm trying to use the words, it's very difficult to moan downwards, I think, or something to that effect.
Everyone's taught to moan upwards when you're a business owner.
And it's difficult when you are that owner. So I presume, like you said earlier, it's very confidential, but people can have the freedom to not have a moan, but just tell other people that are in the same type of environment what's going on, how they're feeling, and somebody can either physically or through some wrap an arm around them, and they can get it off their chest, and they can hear other people that are on the same level as them understand and say, I've been there before, this is what I did. Or it seems like a very nice niche group for those people that are up there, having somebody that they can either rely on or just vent a bad day out. Because as business owners, we all have bad days, but I know we're lucky enough here. We got the two of us, we can moan to each other. But when you're that high and you've got that many people underneath you, sometimes it can be a lonely place.
I used to have a healing massage for many years, especially when I was doing television. The pressure was unrelenting. So like every 2 weeks, I have a really powerful deep tissue massage. And I'd say to the healer, the practitioner who's doing the body work on me, but who heals you? Who heals the healer? I mean, in fact, he presented himself as a healer because he did stuff with crystals and coloured light, which actually worked, by the way, just to let you know, coloured light therapy, in acupuncture points. So I said, who heals you? And it turns out that most healers, most practitioners of bodywork massage, they actually have a formal kind of group. So they trade services. So a masseuse who's like really working deeply, and so you're taking energy off someone. I'm convinced of it, especially if it's negative. They need someone to help them reset and ground themselves, and they have a relationship with other practitioners in the block or in the organizational centre where they work. And so you always ask who heals the healers. Then you discover that therapists and psychotherapists, they have people who observe their, not just professionally, but help them. I forget what they're called, but they have people specifically to help them and listen to them who are helping others. But who helps the business owners? We were touching before as we were kind of chatting and introducing ourselves, and it came up recently in a meeting. And forgive me for going over old ground with you both, but I'm sure one of our members at Ultra said recently that without the small to medium business owners and the taxes which they pay in the UK here, that civilization would collapse. And I go, well, that's quite a bold statement. I mean, it sounds about right. It feels good. But then they explain for a couple of minutes how that actually is the case. And then, of course, you understand that the taxes, you don't have a police force if you haven't got, and civilized. Yeah. And then people riot and loot and, whatever it may be. But you realise, actually, it's the predominant amount of business is done. So who is the moderator? Who's the support? Who is there a fraternity of business owners who actually help each other? And that's I think, going back 3 years, that's why I started Ultra. So there is a bit of networking which goes on, but it is listening and talk about how you're feeling. At the day before each meeting, we reach out to the CEOs who are the members. They're either MDs or CEOs of ordinarily 5 million turnover businesses with staff, crucially, usually more than 10 staff. And we ask them for a mood score. So how's your business 0 to 10? How's your personal life? And what's your mojo? What's the thing which gets you out of bed in the morning? 0 to 10, 10 high, 0 low. We get those in, and then the group chairperson can review those at the beginning of the meeting. We can identify a member. I can't go into details because it's Chatham House rules or confidential, but a member who might be in a really bad way. And I can think of several situations quite recently. A member was in tears. Another member had there'd been a bereavement and then something absolutely horrible, on the personal, and then we rally round. So, and
that's massively powerful. That's not networking. That's pure support for individuals on the same level as you, that they can't talk to anyone else because they're probably at such a level that they should not. So they feel they should not show any sort of vulnerability.
So true. Who can they talk to? Who can a business? Think about it. If civilization depends on small to medium business owners, I forget the percentage of businesses in the UK here. I think it's something like 90% of businesses are SME, i.e. under 250 million turnover. If you use that yardstick, that is the society. That's the civilization.
However it was. I was doing the stats for the other day for something.
It's something else. So who understands the nature of having to make payroll every month and pay? And then if you've got hundreds of staff, so let's just use Nick as an example because it's public. He's got hundreds and hundreds of staff. I would imagine many of these staff have mortgages, and many of these mortgage owning families probably have kids. So Nick wouldn't mind me saying this. So if you couldn't make payroll, for example, one Christmas, God forbid, families run the risk of losing their home, no presents, it's a huge, huge pressure. And as you rightly said there, business owners, who do they talk to? Often they can't speak to their family because maybe the family don't understand, or they don't want to bring the problems back into the family domain because the family got their own problems sometimes. They may not want to speak to their mates, even they go, let's say they go to the pub in the valleys with the friends they grew up with. Well, maybe those friends aren't running multi-million pound companies and doing something different. And why would they want to burden their friends with it? And then you can't speak to your staff. And sometimes you can't speak to your board. You certainly don't probably want to speak to your board about a personal issue with another board member. So that's why Ultra is up and running. And that's why I booked a billboard in Cardiff City Centre just today.
So that Mr. Jones assisted with that?
Yeah, one of your former subjects on the show, I think, of in an early episode, I think you said he was. So yeah, we had fantastic creative done by Rebel Lion in Cardiff. We have a nice billboard in the centre of the city. I thought I did chance that I did use something called the interweb before I started the business, and I've looked in Wales where we're today, and there are no peer groups. I'm not joking. There's no sales and marketing here. It can take up to 3 years for us to welcome one member to one of the groups. I must be honest with you. It's years. These people are busy. Why do they want to, take time out, like half a day a month? That's gold. So I've tried putting a huge billboard up in the city centre. It's one of the biggest ones, illuminated. And I thought, just to build awareness. And it says grow, support, lead, share. And I thought, those are the words. And those are Matt's words, by the way.
That's massive, though, just listening to it. Networking is all good and well. Sometimes people don't actually need to network. They just need someone there to be available to listen to them. Because, as you said, it's very difficult to go back home because family couldn't care less, maybe at times, and maybe family-related issue. And actually, all the stress. It's almost like an invisible stress that if somebody goes to their friends that they've grown up with and they rock up in a very nice car and they've got a Rolex and they've just come from the £3 million house and go, what do you know about stress? You've got no stress. We can't pay the bills. Everyone has stress in some format, but the people that have been successful in this environment seemingly are not allowed to be worried and stressful about, as you say, making payroll for their staff and all that. So it's really nice that there is an organisation or a group of people now that can get together and ban the shit that's going on in their head together to help each other. You
mentioned cars, and that's a funny one. I'm a petrol head, but I've just recently bought a electric plug-in hybrid, and it's a very nice car. And I found, having said to people about the joys of living in Wales for the last year, I was in a queue in a coffee shop. I hope this person's not listening. And I literally paused for 1 second in the car, like going to the car park or something, yesterday, and I was getting beep, beep, beep. I literally didn't even pause. I just reduced my speed. And I realised that it's a nice car, of course, and actually, but I've worked really hard up until 2.5 years ago. I did nothing but 7-day weeks, probably 12 to 18-hour days. Honestly, it's come at a price. And I also believe that it's not always about profit in a business. If you have lots of staff, it is because you've got to make that payroll. You've got to pay people's livings. But I've been lucky to have quite small businesses in a way, with not too many staff and lots of freelancers and that sort of thing. And events is very much like that. But I realised, actually being quite nimble is helpful. But it's come at a price. And the car thing is interesting. If you have a really old, okay, I'll be authentic, because I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying I'm sponsored by effectively by Jaguar Land Rover, and I was up until a few months ago, I was turning up in a 20-year-old Jaguar Land Rover product, let's say a Discovery, and I just thought, hang on, what are they thinking here? I'm presenting myself as leading leaders. I've got actually at the time, the boss of Barclays leading one group, the head of Sony Wales and the head of the Welsh Football Association running another, General Sir Peter Wall leading another group, and I'm turning up in a 20-year-old car outside their showroom. There's not a single car which is less than 5 years old sitting in a Jaguar Land Rover, and I'm arriving in a 20-year-old Discovery. It's very practical, by the way, and once they've gone through their problems, you've dealt with them, and it was a great car to have because you can throw it around, go up mountains in it, and that's what I like to do. But it doesn't alter the fact that it presents an image. And it's not the right image, actually. It should be something a bit newer, a bit more economical, not the really big gas-guzzling ones of days of old. Yeah. And I realised it says so much about who you are. And if you have something too flash, it's a no-no, because that's your customers' money is spending on nice, flashy cars. And if you have something too vanilla, I'm not sure if it presents yourself as the company owner. It's a lot of sort of toing froing I was doing. And then, of course, now I'm thinking about doing an EV conference along with an AI conference in Wales. Actually, I'm teeing that up with various people, and therefore I can't rock up in an ICE engine. So there's actually this consideration you have to think. It's kind of, you have to think about a bunch of things when you run a company.
It's mental, because for us, we plan for people, we plan for exits in businesses, for retirement and all that. And one of the underpins of the work we do is we tell people where to put their money, and we segregate it out into different portfolios and stuff like that. So technically we tell them where to put it. They think we look after it. If we rock up in an Aston Martin, I'm paying you too much money, Shane. If we rock up in a, no disrespect, a 27-year-old Toyota Starlet, am I the only person paying you because you can't afford a decent car? It's a really, really tight line that you have to do.
We had this conversation about ordering cars, didn't we?
Yeah.
Is this? We had a list of them. We were like, can't order that.
You have to be very careful because there is a perception. Exactly. We have a different perception in the world of finance. I'm either paying you too much or I'm subsidizing your whole company because the amount of money I'm paying you, you can't afford a better car than that. It's a really, really strange one.
When I was a broadcaster, it was okay. It was fine. It was actually, that was okay to have a nice car. Yeah. And I should add, I think I touched on this when I arrived, but I could only ever actually drive a car 10 years ago because I couldn't get insurance. As a broadcaster, I was working for the Sunday Mirror for 20 years and I was a charity auctioneer. Uniquely, those combinations put you out of getting insurance. Whatever they say, you can't find it. So I rode motorcycles, and when you're a presenter, you have certain on network telly, they give you a car, so you get to places on time. And I lived in cities. I cycled or rode a motorbike, so it was all good. But here's the thing. So I finally found a company, and actually I was living over in England, but it was a company in Wales, a famous company called Admiral, and they were the one company who would insure me, but it was their online version called Elephant, weirdly. But I remember having about 2 months of conversations, and this is something. Again, it's a first world problem, but just I want to put this in context. Bear in mind, I was doing at that point, probably 5-6 days a week. I was working very, very hard and not doing a good job over profit. But when I could finally pass my and I was doing well on television. So I had a show on, affected my own show every day on ITV1, which is one of the 5 main channels in the UK, with a co-presenter. So I did that. I was doing that day in, day out. It was absolutely grueling. If you make a mistake, you can't go back and say to the editors, the production team, I've got a valuation wrong, please change it. So, it's very high pressure stuff. So I finally found this company to insure me. I was thinking about what I wanted, the dream. So I went out and bought a pre-loved Aston Martin. It was amazing. It was a soft top. I only planned to own it for a year. And that was the plan. I think most people who are not super high net worth individuals, they actually own a car for about a year, and insurance was a big chunk of the consideration. But if you can imagine, and I must tell you as well, months beforehand, both my parents had died within a month and a half of each other. It was a torrid year. So I thought, look, I'm going to do something here. I'm this age. I've never driven a car. I learned in a Clio. And then I went out the next day and bought this beautiful Aston Martin.
Sorry, your very first car was an Aston Martin?
Correct. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the
Bonkers.
story. Come on.
So the first day, the next morning, I go to the dealership, and it's an unusual mark. And for those who are listening abroad, there's not Aston Martin dealerships all over the UK. And there certainly wasn't one anywhere near me. So anyway, I found somewhere, and I went to go look at the car. And the long and short of it was, I finally thought, I'm here. I've spent 3 months, a first world problem, admittedly, but it's a dream. I need something to deal with the grief. I need an event. I need to explore. I need to get into a car. I need to enjoy myself. I love fast bikes and Harley Davidsons. So here's a lovely car. So I went there and I scoped it out. I sort of almost knew the one I was going to get. It was pre-loved. So, and as I arrived to go and buy it, it was a long journey from the dealer, and there was somebody flying their baby around the outside of it like Superman. And I realised, and it was a couple, so I realised that they were there, and I got the impression, I kind of got the impression that this was the final decision they're going to make on this car. So, and funny enough, I didn't understand things like financing because it's very, very complicated, right? So, and for various reasons, I was able to get into that car and just make a decision there and then without trying to work this all out because it was a nightmare. So that was a lucky thing. So I got this dream car. My then girlfriend got in alongside me. I knew I was insured. That took about 2 months to negotiate. It's called risk of association, by the way, if you're a presenter and a journalist. So they figure that, in fact, they know that you may pick up a celebrity. So the example would be if I picked up a Premiership footballer, somebody from Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, and I had a crash because I was an inexperienced driver, but I had a crash because I'm likely to be in those situations at charity events. I'm a journalist, so I'm upsetting even though I wasn't a journalist, I wrote about antiques and collectibles. They put you down as a journalist. So I'm not being flippant here, but they assume you're going into war zones, upsetting organised crime, all this sort of stuff, which I wasn't. I was just writing about antiques and collectibles, but they have to put you in that category. So again, massive first world problem. I'm not, but you cannot get insurance. That's the bottom line, certainly in that triple situation I was in. So I had my dream car. I thought I was just about to miss it. I managed to get it. Then I got into it and I realised, this is not really easy. It's a really heavy, it's a hand-built car. So my girlfriend, for the first week, and I have no shame here, left a bit, right a bit, because I'd only ever driven motorbikes. We were in the middle, right? So if you're at the right of something, how do you drive a car? So the first morning I went across something called the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which is a beautiful history. And he knows it. There's a chicane. There's a high level concrete chicane which goes up to midway through the panels on the car. I went through that and absolutely ripped up the wheels. Doesn't matter how many right a bit, left a bit. Yeah, it was a nightmare. So again, poor little me, but it was an amazing. The first thing I did, first weekend, drove to North Wales again with my then girlfriend, going left a bit, right a bit, all the way through these beautiful mountains, up towards up to from Abergavenny, Aberystwyth, up into Snowdonia. It was just amazing. So let me put it to you that if you've never driven a car, if you've always loved cars, if you love performance vehicles, if you always had that poster when you were a kid, you literally have dreamed about owning a nice car, and you hit a certain age, which is much later than you think, and you're finally able to drive a car and you can buy your dream car, and it's a manual, and it's a V8, and it's a 4.7 litre, and it's a soft top, and it's 2012, and it was a nice summer, and there was a lovely spirit in the country because of the Olympic Games and all this sort of stuff. And then you drive to North Wales and you can just about do it with a co-pilot going left a bit, right a bit, because you're sat at the wrong side of the car because you're not in the middle, and you make it, even though I ripped up the wheels on day one. It was magical. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And I'll say this, and this comes from working very hard and putting customers first usually, and believing doing a good job well is the most important thing above profit. That's what up until very recent, I've really, really felt that. So they say money can't buy happiness. I'm not a super high net worth individual, anything like that. I'm really not. But sometimes if you've saved up and you've done the right thing and you've waited and you have this dream thing, it can buy happiness. I had an amazing year. I was heartbroken. I was grieving. But what put a smile on my face was being able to drive this beautiful hand-built thing where nobody went the W word as I drove past, because they associate it with cool things like James Bond. It's a cool brand. And it was hand-built and people knew that. And it was a little bit loud and all that jazz, but it was magical. So for anyone who's struggling in their business and thinks there's light at the end of the tunnel and you think you can reward yourself, and it's a really important thing to do, is to reward yourself at least once. And I make no bones, I sold it and got myself into a mid 2000s Mini Cooper or something, and that's another story. So, but it is well worth it.
I think, to a point, I'll disagree that money does not buy you happiness, because there has been something out recently about Prince Boateng. We talked about this morning, played for Spurs, and he said on one day, he was on $2 million a year, he went out and bought a Lamborghini Gallardo, a Hummer, and a 1970s Cadillac in one day. And you said this morning, sat right there, go, yeah, but he had a bloody good day. It doesn't bring you happiness, money. I think what is important is if you understand what makes you happy, and you align your spending with that. Right. That's more important, because far too many of us, especially since March 2020, fire so much money at Amazon on plastic items trying to find happiness. Whereas if happiness, I think, is having coffee with your friends, then that spending aligned with that makes sure that happiness is forever. And it actually reduces your spending, because you don't spend money on shit. Otherwise, pardon my French, you spend it on what things make you happy. So if forever and ever you've always grown up with a James Bond fascination and you want an Aston Martin, your DB5 or something, go and bloody buy it if you work hard, if it's aligned with happiness. So I have no issue with that. But I think just the concept of money buying you happiness doesn't exist if you're just trying to find happiness. I think you have to know what the happiness is first, and then align the spending with it. There's my rant over.
You're not a financial planning expert by any chance, are you?
I'm a financial planner. The expert in brackets might not be applicable. Yeah, but that's the kind of thing that you're in the room here now. We do try and talk to people about is not saving and squirreling money away. It's actually bloody enjoying what they have and making sure they have a great life now and the future's taken care of. Go and spend it. And far too many go spend the money. I'll finish with this story. A couple of weeks ago, there's the client, and I asked him, I rang him up many, many weeks ago and said, look, we need to start spending money. And, okay, I said, I'm going to give you 5 weeks, and I'm going to give you...
You were saying this to your client?
Yeah. I was going to give you
a good call.
5 weeks, and I want you to start thinking about what you're going to spend, because it's just building up, and you've worked hard all your life. Okay, fine. This was Tuesday, a few weeks ago, at about 4:30. Wednesday, at 5:10, he rang me. Shane, I need 20 grand. I said, for what? I'm just in a car showroom buying a car. I wanted you to have a few weeks. And we've had a joke about it. But because I know the rest of the family, they've spoken to me and he's delighted. He needed that little push to understand he needed to spend it. And it was me giving him the authority to go and spend it. And he's delighted now. He's bought a new car because he really needed one. So it's not about putting it all to the side all the time. It is for young business owners who we have to kind of rein in. But for the older business owners, it's the exit plans. And you can never get your egg or ducks lined up in a row, because there's something that always happens. But you can actually start to plan further out for reducing your working hours or doing whatever. So people need to spend money. Maybe not in an Aston Martin on the very first car. Wow. But they do need to spend money.
Yeah, that's a big one for us, because we have a lot of clients who squirrel money away all their lives, then come to their retirement and like, I'm not going to spend anything. They live on like effectively what I would class the COVID budget. And you're like, we have to encourage them to spend.
That's a good job. You're like a candy shop.
Yeah.
You can get people.
It's actually very hard.
It is.
Because if you spend all your life saving and now you're being told to spend that money and you've never been a spender before, it's very hard to change someone's mindset.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift, I would say, if they've been prudent.
It takes a bit of time, and I've got some clients where it's taken 3 years into retirement before they've eventually let the reins off, because they trust in the process, trust in like the fact that they're not going to run out of money and they can do the things they want to do. So it can be very interesting. And that, like Shane says, we have to rein some of the business owners in because they're spending a bit too much and not keeping
the younger ones
little corner of the eye on the future, because you've still got to keep that in check and still have some fun. But it's teaching them new ways of actually investing for the future, protecting for the future.
I understand.
Yeah. It's good.
It's a bit deep now.
I did go very deep.
Very deep. I think I prefer the Star Wars and Aston Martin chat, but
no, that was good. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on, and who knows, maybe I'll come back in a few years' time and
absolutely
talk about my next little project.
We do like a repeat. We did a repeat the other day.
Yeah, with another Aston Martin story.
Really? Oh, very nice. You got 250 podcasts in the can, so I'm going to flip it around on you guys. How many episodes is this going to run to? Is it unlimited?
Yeah, I think so. We took a little bit of a hiatus while we kind of had a rethink of how we were going to do things in the business and going forward. But I don't see us stopping. I think we'll take it to another gear.
I'd like to go out and about again. I'd like to go to the business owners' place of business.
That's what we want to do.
And chat to them without giving too much away, going, I don't like them the staff out there, but I'd like to go in-house and do the video side of it. And I don't think we ever envisaged getting probably past 20. And then we got to 100, and then it's just going on and on.
I think the stats say something like 2/3 of podcasts don't get past like 5 or 6 episodes, something stupid like that. But like we kind of,
it's consistency, isn't it?
It is consistency.
That's a big number you've done, and
I think video would be the next one. And we're having conversations. When we did a little bit of video, we did video some of our podcasts before. But we want to get to the point, I think, where maybe we do go in business and we do film it, and it becomes effectively like a series. Yeah.
I hear you.
I think that's something you'd like to do, because we like talking to business owners. We learn a lot of stuff from it as well. And I'd like to think our listeners do.
So you'll
be fine. Bit of makeup and
May I be on the nose and invite your listeners, if they're interested, to visit a website about Ultra? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course.
So if any listeners are interested in joining a peer group or just discovering more about what a mastermind for businesses in the UK can look like, but I encourage people to visit EVO Ultra.com. And there's lots of information, photos and all that jazz there.
And we'll link that in the show notes anyway.
Very nice.
We'll link to all that in the show notes, so we'll get all that from you afterwards.
Thank you.